Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Sorry, and you're trying to say something.
No, I was just telling that at work also, because we are on this dog food version of Teams. Every time, like every 2 weeks,
Oh
there's a
yeah, yeah.
new interface.
Right.
So
Yeah, I have to post last 2 weeks of classes. I'll take some time out to do this week. So sorry about
yeah,
that.
I couldn't attend Prabhuji last 2 weeks. Sorry, I had
Yeah, no worries.
some.
I'll, yeah,
Sorry,
I can
Prabhu.
understand. No, I was saying, yeah, I mean, sometimes we all have different schedules. So I'll post the recordings from last 2 weeks, and then we can go over a quick recap of
Yes, Prabhu.
what was conducted. I think last 2 weeks means you would have, was it verse 23 is the one that you last attended?
Yeah, I think 22 is what from what I
Okay.
remember. Yeah.
So, yeah, let's do a quick recap. So, fourth chapter is talking about transcendental knowledge, Jnana Yoga, and the discussion. Krishna begins. In, he establishes his unique position. He's making it clear that his birth and activities are divine. And why does he appear? Well, he appears whenever there is rise in religion, decline in religion. He comes to annihilate the demons, deliver the pious, re-establish the religion. And in that regard, he is starting a new chain of disciplic succession. And Arjuna is his disciple in this regard. And he mentions that in the past there are many who have achieved perfection. They all became purified by knowledge, and they attain his transcendental love. And Arjuna can also achieve the same destination. Then he goes on to say that the everyone follows his path in all respects. It's just that they approach him differently. And to the extent that they surrender to him, he rewards accordingly. And so many of them approach him indirectly through the worship of the demigods. Uh, and because they desire quick results, so that's the reason they approach demigods. But ultimately, it's Krishna who is the original benefactor. The demigods are not able to provide benedictions independently. Then he goes on to talk about the four divisions of the society. Because people are fruitively inclined, right? That fruitive inclination needs to be channelized, and so that conditioned living entities can be slowly brought to the platform of spirituality. And for that purpose, the four divisions of the Varnas are created. And And so somebody might think, well, Krishna is also one of them. He is also, when he was on this earth, he's performed different kind of prescribed duties. And so they might think, well, he is also affected by fruitive activities. And especially when he's saying, well, I am the creator of the Varnashram, that means, maybe there's a purpose that he has to achieve. Because we don't do anything without a purpose. So Krishna says, no, no, no. Though I am the creator of the four Varnas, actually I am not affected by it. No? There's no work that affects me. Neither am I trying to achieve any results. So those who understand this, they do not become entangled. It's not a theoretical understanding, but the acting realization of that Krishna does not get entangled, though he is a creator. And then we also channel our approach or consciousness in the footsteps of other realized devotees who also have a perfect understanding of Krishna's position. Then we can achieve perfection. And then he talks about how people, they are can be bewildered. What is action? What is inaction? So we had a long discussion on that. Those who know the truth, they are able to see action in inaction and inaction in action. Ultimately, one has to come to the platform of knowledge. So even if one has, fruity mentality, or they are doing prescribed duties, the whole purpose of performing those activities is to come to proper knowledge of who is the real benefactor, why I am doing this, what is what am I, the action that I'm doing, is it really action or is it inaction? Am I getting implicated in the work? How do I get out of it? So one who is actually situated in a knowledge for such a worker, all the reactions of work have been burned by the fire of perfect knowledge. So in this way, he's encouraging Krishna to abandon all kind of attachment to to the results of his activities, be satisfied, and not perform activities with fruitive mentality, though one might be engaged in all kind of undertakings based on one's varna. So such an understanding acts with mind and intelligence perfectly controlled. So in this way, one is able to control mind intelligence, gives a false sense of proprietorship, right? In this way, one is not entangled by sinful reactions. And we talked about Ajagar Vritti, like a python who is self-satisfied. He does not go out to hunt its prey. It's generally lying in a particular location in the swamps, right? And then some prey comes, he attacks the prey. So in this way, a person is satisfied with whatever gains that comes on its own accord. One is free from dualities. One who does not get disturbed either by success or failure. Right? If one can learn how to tolerate success, then one can learn how to tolerate failure. A man who is not attached to the modes of material nature, who is always satisfied in transcendental knowledge, such a person ultimately merges into transcendence. Yes. Then we talked about last time. We talked about different kind of sacrifices, which is verses 24 through 26. We could read 26, 27, 28. We read through 28, right, Maulik?
Yes.
Yeah, so we'll do 29. So I'll give you a quick recap of those verses through 28. Let me pull out my notes. That might be. I have made my notes on different kind of sacrifices. Might be faster to go over them. So here, interestingly, my side notes over here. So we're talking about sacrifices, right? And so sacrifices are referred to in Sanskrit as satra, satrena. So it means through sacrifices one achieve perfection. And the series of verses, Krishna elaborates on those different sacrifices. Then if you make the as big no, sorry, satra. Now you introduce another sa, half sa before ta. So satra becomes sastra, right? So the Kshatriyas, right? Yeah, they use the weapons. Just by introducing half sa, the satra becomes sastra, sastrena. Through the use of weapons, so the Kshatriyas, they perform their prescribed duties and they achieve perfection. And when you make the as a big in sastra, if you make it big it becomes sastra. The Brahmanas, they are engaged in studies of Sastra. It's just an observation. It's not direct correlation to the subject we are discussing. Okay, so in verse 25, Krishna says there are two kind of sacrifices based on who the beneficiary is. So there are people who offer different substances in the fire of yajna for the satisfaction of demigods. And then those who because they have fruity mentality, they want to enjoy the results. But then those who are seeking liberations, the jnanis, they offer the self in the fire of the Brahman, right? So now they, in subsequent verses, the fire will be represented by different things like sense control, right? And then within that fire, what would you offer in the fire of sense control? Well, you offer the desires, right? So similarly, in the fire of Brahman, one will offer one's own self. Why? Because the jnanis, they are interested in impersonal liberation. They want to merge. They want to merge themselves in the Brahman. So in that sense, they are offering themselves in the fire of the Brahman, you see. So in this way, the word uses Daiva Yagyam and Brahma Agno Yagyam. In verse 25, Daiva is the demigods, Yagya for the satisfaction of demigods, because they don't have the full understanding that, well, demigods are actually under the jurisdiction of Krishna. So then, but Jnanis who have some better knowledge, better than the Karmis, so they are engaged in Brahma Agno Yagyam, fire of the Brahman. In the next set of verses, which is verse 25, 426, there is another classification of yajna. The first is samyam agno. So the brahmacharis, they up to 25 years of age, they are encouraged to perform celibacy and sense control, because when the senses are young, they want to enjoy. But a life of unrestricted sense enjoyment just leads to degradation. So the brahmacharis are trained to offer their desires of sense enjoyment in the fire of sense control. So that sense control is samyam. So the fire of self-control is samyam agno. But on the other hand, the grihasthas who have some license for regulated sense enjoyment, not unregulated or neither opposite to the injunctions of the scripture. So within those bounds, and they are allowed some sense enjoyment. So for them, what is the sacrifice? For them, the sacrifice is the fire becomes the senses. And what do senses desire? Sense objects. So offerings, objects of enjoyment in the fire of senses is considered as a sacrifice for householder. How does that make sense? Well, of course, whatever objects of enjoyment that the householder has access to, we first offer it to Krishna, and then we take it as a prasadam. So there is enjoyment, but the enjoyment is secondary. So anything, new house, new home, new car, you first offer it to Krishna. If you have a deity in the home, right, you got a new car, then you would put the deities in the car and take them out for a ride, right? And then the car is used for many other services directly related to Krishna. And then so Krishna is again at the center of. Somebody buys a new home, but the first thing we do is go and establish the deities. The deities are the real owner of the home, and we are simply the servants. The devotees who would read their monthly financial statement to the deities. Hey, Krishna, this is your money, this is how I spend. Right? So in this way, everything, there is an enjoyment, but this enjoyment is as a secondary enjoyer. And so for the householders, the sacrifice consists of offering the sense objects in the fire of senses. For brahmacharis, it is the opposite. What is the fire? The fire is that of sense control. And what are we burning? We are offering the desires. That means we are burning our desires. And then Atma Samyam Yogagano. So this I interpreted as referring to the Vanprasth. So the Vanprasth, they are supposed to engage their, expose or subject their senses to extreme discomfort or extreme elements of the nature and still not be disturbed by it. So here Atma Samyam is same as Samyam, right? Like the brahmacharis. And there's Agno also, but there's another word that is introduced which is not there in reference to brahmacharis, Yoga Agno. So what is the difference? The brahmachari is also doing sense control. The vanprasth is also doing sense control. The brahmachari sense control is to restrain one's desires, not indulge in those desires. For vanprasth, yoga agno means senses are subjected. Yoga means linking. The senses are subjected to not the comforts, right? But it is subjected to the discomforts purposefully. And while being subjected to discomfort, one does not get disturbed. So that is the fire of Atma Samyam. So in that fire of self-control, one is offering the uh, the exposure to discomforts, right? Discomfort, which is perceived as a discomfort for the senses, whatever is generally not very comfortable or austere, that becomes an offering in that fire. And then finally, there are different kind of classifications of yajna based on the method or what is being offered. So one is the conventional one is dravya yajna, when the substances are offered. But then there is other sacrifice of austerity, tapo yajna. Then the yajna of mysticism or ashtanga yoga, that is the actual yoga yajnas. And then there's yajna of swadhyay jnana yajnas. That means sacrifice that consists of self-study of scriptures in cultivating knowledge. And finally, we'll discuss, we did not discuss verse 29, right, last time. So we'll start with verse 29. But the essence of verse 29 is, again, there are two classifications in this, pranayam and pranan, praneshu. So pranayam means restraining or controlling the breath, just like a yogi. I think maybe we read verse 29 also. So prana, the idea of prana, what actually is prana? Generally, prana we understand as the incoming life breath. So which is true, but beyond that, prana has a subtle functioning also. What is the subtle functioning? Prana is a force by which sense objects are connected to the senses. So we have 5 knowledge acquiring senses, right? So the prana vayu connects the smell to the sense organ of nose. And then there is another vayu, apana, which if the smell is not very pleasing, we don't want to imbibe that further. We try to disconnect. So apana is exhalation, just like we exhale carbon dioxide or the air which is not pure. Similarly, apan also works on other senses. So in case of nose, the absorb good smell, that is prana. If something is not pleasing, we reject it. Similarly, prana also acts on the tongue. It connects the different varieties of taste. There are 6 varieties of the taste. They are connected to the attribute of taste which resides in the tongue through prana, right? Similarly, different objects that are perceived by attributes like shape, color, size, the values of shapes, square, round, or colors, different varieties of colors, and the sizes of small, these are all different values. Those values are connected to the categories or the attributes of shape, size, and color which reside in the eyes, through the force of prana. So similarly, prana also acts on the skin, also acts on the ears. So what is the yoga process consist of? The yoga means you basically, if the senses are always busy connecting with or engaging with sense objects, then one cannot look inwardly, because sense objects reside outward, outside the body. If you want to realize the soul and Paramatma, which is inside, then you have to restrain your connection with the outside world. So pranayama practice is inward looking. One try to realize the soul and super soul which resides in the body. So that is also a sacrifice in the pursuit of self-realization, where the prana vayu is offered as an object in the fire of neutrality or balance. The incoming and outgoing breath are balanced. It means they kind of merge into each other. On the other hand, so that is inward looking process, but there is an outward looking process of sacrifice also. So pranana praneshu. So praneshu refers to the senses, and the senses are powered by prana. Is the force. I just explained, right? How if prana is not there, then the sense objects cannot be connected to the senses. Well, what is the difference between a dead person and a living person? We say the dead person does not have prana. We say the living person has a prana. What does that mean? Well, it's a dead body. The eyes, nose, everything is intact, right? Ears, everything's intact. The sense objects are all around that dead body, but then dead body is not interacting with the sense objects. Why? For all the five senses. Because the force, prana, the life force, why is called life force? Prana is not there. That means prana is the force by which sense objects are connected to the senses. So the other process of sacrifice is where one is actually putting the life force in the senses, not for enjoyment, but for the service as a sacrifice. So that is also a process. And this way, different kind of sacrifices are described in this series of verses. So I believe if we did not do 429, we can, I describe the essence, but let's go over the verse. Verse number 29. आपने जुवति प्राणं प्राणे अपानं तथा परे प्राणपान गतिरुद्ध्वा प्राणायाम परायणः अपरे नियताहारा प्राणान् प्राणेषु जुवति. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Shri Shri Bhakti Vedanta Swami Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: Still others who are inclined to the process of breath restraint, to remain in trance, practice by offering the movement of outgoing breath into the incoming. And in this way, both are balanced. And the incoming breath into the outgoing. Thus, at last, they remain in trance, stopping all breathing. Others, curtailing eating process, offer the outgoing breath into itself as a sacrifice. So this is the other process that I described. This is a technical understanding of what that prana and praneshu refers to. I translated in a more an understanding which we can apply in our life. Here the explanation is more in a technical terms, right? Purport by Srila Prabhupada. These systems of yoga for controlling the breathing process is called pranayama. In the beginning, it is practiced in the Hatha Yoga system through different sitting postures. So different kind of asanas are practiced, first of all. All of these processes are recommended for controlling the senses for advancement in spiritual realization, right? So anything, if you don't have the posture correct, first of all, right, then we cannot be suited for the activity. Just like, if I go to the temple, I sit on a nice comfortable chair like this, and I imagine myself to be humble, then it's not possible, right? So if we sit on the floor, sit erect, you meditate on Krishna, it's very easier. It's like when I try to teach our children, especially when they are young, they are too playful. They say, okay, sit down, time to study. They don't sit down, right? They run around. If they don't sit erect, they lie down. Something, some toy in the hand or anything, they just want to fiddle. Then what is happening? The mind is distracted. So they cannot focus on the subject matter. So similarly for spiritual realization, these different sitting postures are very important. They help control the senses, help focus the mind. So this practice involves controlling the airs within the body. So there are different chakras or air systems within the body. So this practice involving controlling air within the body so as to reverse the direction of their passage. So they are very active, the airs within the body, and they are functioning in a particular way. But if you want to realize the soul and super soul, which are very subtle, if there's a lot of commotion going around, you cannot realize them. Just like, you know, if there's too much noise in a room, people are chit-chatting, then if you drop an object, no one realizes it, right? So we used to, during our school days, a teacher used to say, well, you need to have pin drop silence. That means everyone should be so silent that even if a pin drops, one can listen. Similarly, by curtailing different activities of the body, which, because when the activities are going on, there's a lot of noise within the body. We are aware of different things going inside the body uh, to some extent, and so the senses are being engaged with sense objects through prana. And so then our mind focuses on all these things which are external to the body, and so we cannot realize what is inside. And so yogis, they reverse the actions of those airs, and by that they try to create a silence as such, and so their mind can focus on subtle entities, which is the soul and the super soul. The apana, air goes downward, and the prana air goes up. So inhalation, exhalation, right? The pranayama yogi practices breathing the opposite way until the currents are neutralized into purak or equilibrium, right? So what it is that the incoming breath, the yogi tries to exhale, and the outgoing breath, it tries to inhale. So they kind of lock each other, right? And so by locking, it's called that purak or equilibrium. So now their inhalation, exhalation of the pranavayu, if it stopped, then the engagement with the sense objects is also stopped. Offering the exhaled breath into the inhaled breath is called rechak. When both air currents are completely stopped, one is said to be in kumbhaka yoga. By practice of kumbhaka yoga, one can increase the duration of life for perfection and spiritual realization. So by scriptural estimates, it is mentioned that when we take birth, the number of life breaths we have been assigned is fixed. You cannot extend our life beyond those life breaths that we have been assigned. And so the yogis, by reducing their breathing, they're extending their life duration. Right? So if in the normal course of time, the number of breaths are fixed. So the intelligent yogi is interested in attaining perfection in one life without waiting for next. If the time is limited, then you extend the time. Right? So in this way, by practicing kumbhaka yoga, yogi increase the duration of life by many, many years. A Krishna conscious person, however, always being situated in transcendental loving service of the Lord, automatically becomes a controller of the senses. There is not extra endeavor required. Of course, it's very difficult to practice these yoga systems and different postures in the current age in its real spirit. But the same principles can be applied for the concluding understanding. The yogic process is also a little slow. Ultimately, it will bring to the understanding of the personality of Godhead. But in previous ages, people had a much longer duration of life. So they went structurally in a gradual process. But one, even in the service of Krishna, we want to avoid things which are distracting us from that goal and accept things which are favorable. Uh, you don't want to be disturbed by comforts and discomforts. So in that sense, the pranavayu also needs to be controlled, though it might not necessarily require sitting postures, but the principles apply. So for a devotee, his senses, being always engaged in service of Krishna, have no chance of becoming otherwise engaged. So Prabhupada is saying, for a pure devotee who is always engaged, he does not need to apply techniques of pranayama to control the senses. They're automatically controlled as they are engaged in the service of the Lord. So at the end of the life, he is naturally transferred to the transcendental plane of Lord Krishna. Consequently, he makes no attempt to increase his longevity. He is at once raised to the platform of liberation as stated in Bhagavad Gita 14:26. Mam chayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityetan brahma bhuvaya kalpate. One who engages in unalloyed devotional service to the Lord transcends the modes of material nature, sattva, rajas, tamas, and is immediately elevated to the spiritual platform. A Krishna conscious person begins from the transcendental stage and is constantly in that consciousness. So, right from the beginning, a devotee is at a transcendental stage, and then he continues in that consciousness. So, in the material world, we are always trying to achieve something. Krishna consciousness directly brings us to transcendental state. The only effort we have to put, and we have to put that effort every moment, is that we continue to remain on that consciousness. Therefore, there is no falling down, ultimately enters into the abode of the Lord without delay. The practice of reduced eating is automatically done when only eats Krishna prasadam, or food which is offered first to the Lord. Reducing the eating process is very helpful in the matter of sense control, and without sense control, there is no possibility of getting out of material entanglement. So, last time we talked about how the tongue, the belly, and the genitals are connected. If the tongue is uncontrolled, uh, then it's engaged in talking about all sort of things. Similarly, it's also engaged in eating whatever titillates the sense of taste. And in this way, the belly is filled beyond its need. And when the belly is filled, it puts pressure on the genitals, and the genitals are agitated. And then one engages in unrestrained sexual activity. So, in this way, the whole life is spoiled, and one cannot pursue spiritual realization. Without sense control, there is no possibility of getting out of material entanglement. So, these principles of yoga are applicable. We can take the essence and apply in our devotional practices. I'll take a pause for any questions or comments on verse 29. Okay. Verse number 30. Sarve api ete yagyavido yagyakshapita kalmasa yagyasistamrita bhujo yanti brahma sanatanam. Translation: all these performers who know the meaning of sacrifice become cleansed of sinful reactions. So, what is the key? Key is again knowledge, right? As the chapter title suggests, one has to understand the meaning ultimately of whatever activity one is doing. Such a person is not affected by sinful reaction, having tasted the nectar of the results of sacrifices. Then they advance towards the supreme eternal atmospheres. Amrita Bhujaha. So, in the beginning, this practice is when we don't have understanding of what this is meant for, what is this sacrifice, how is it a sacrifice, and we might be doing out of our attachment or for our other ulterior motives because somebody asked to do it, and so it does not sound very pleasing. Just like when the child is asked to study but does not understand the purpose of studying, right? does not understand the instruments, why I have to study in this particular methodology, right? He does not understand different stages of learning, has no idea about the object, final object of achievement, the instruments used to achieve that object, or the process that is entailed. And so the child is not interested in studying. It does not their experiences that of something very unpleasant. But when the child grows up, in goes to higher school, and he develops a taste for learning, he understands the purpose why he has to study, the instruments or the methodologies which are applied in studying, then he is self-motivated. And the same process appears as nectar. He is engaged, motivated. So similarly, when we don't have the proper understanding, we don't know the meaning in our neophyte stage. It's not obvious to us that it is nectarian, but one who has that perfect understanding, then they apply things in proper perspective. They're not affected by sin, and they have actually now tasted the real nectar of those sacrifices. In this way, they advance towards the supreme eternal atmosphere, Sanatanam. Purport. From the foregoing explanation of different types of sacrifices, namely sacrifices of one's possession, study of the Vedas, what was it? Swadhyaya Jnana Yagya. This is Dravya Yagya, one's possessions, and performance of the yoga system, that is Yoga Agno. Your Yoga Yagya. It is found that the common aim of all of them is what? Sense control. Right? Because sacrifices, what does sacrifice mean? Sacrifice means giving up. Giving up what? Something that is pleasing to us. For what? For satisfaction of someone else. Just like a parent is very involved and very interested in the success of the child. For that, the parent does personal sacrifices. Maybe they don't put so much focus on their career that they would have done otherwise if they were single, or they put other priorities, but they invest time, energy, money in teaching the child. Why? Because then they get satisfaction and the child makes progress. So they are doing some sacrifices for the benefit of someone else. That some sacrifice means it's not benefiting me directly, but I want to give up those things for benefit of someone else. So similarly, sacrifice here is the satisfaction of Vishnu. When Vishnu is satisfied, then automatically later on everyone is satisfied. But if we try to satisfy ourselves directly, then that results into frustration. So the ultimate goal of all this, goal of all the sacrifices is to control the senses. Because sense gratification is the root cause of material existence. Therefore, unless and until one is situated on a platform apart from sense gratification, there is no chance of being elevated to eternal platform, full of knowledge, full of bliss, and full of life. Sata Chitta Ananda. So full bliss is Ananda, knowledge is Chitta, and full life is Sata. Right now, our life is Asata. It will end when the body perishes. The soul keeps on living, but our experience of our identity within a particular race, caste, religion, gender, nationality comes to an end. And what is perceived as attributes of life is generally within the context that I just mentioned. So, by sense control, we give up the identification with the body, because the body consists of all the senses, right? As long as we are engaged in sense gratification, our bodily identification continues, and their understanding of full life is never realized. But when we stop engaging at the platform of senses, we start engaging in the platform of spirit, then we realize the Supreme Spirit, and we are elevated to that platform at the end of the life. This platform is in eternal atmosphere, or the Brahman. All the above mentioned sacrifices help one to become cleansed of the sinful reactions of material existence. By this advancement in life, one not only does one become happy and opulent in his life, but also at the end he enters into the eternal kingdom of knowledge, eternal kingdom of God, either merging into the impersonal Brahman or associating with the Supreme Personality of God. So Gyanis who don't have full understanding, they pursue the impersonal Brahman. For the Bhaktas, who have the understanding of the personality of Godhead, for them the object is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. The yogis, they meditate on the localized aspect of Paramatma, which resides within their heart. Any questions on verse number 30? Okay. Moving on, verse number 31. Nayam loko asti ayagyasya kuto anya kuru sattam. Translation: O based of Kuru dynasty, without sacrifice, one can never live happily on this planet or in this life. What then to speak of the next? Right. So, in the beginning, we went through the understanding. I think it was previous chapter, perhaps, where Krishna has said, talks about the cycle of sacrifices. He says, Chakra. I established this chakra of sacrifices where he elaborates, right? If you want to live, for living entities, they subsist on grains. Annad bhavanti bhutani. Parjanyad anna sambhava. And the grains, they come from the rains. When there is rain, then the grains will grow. How does the rain come from? Yagyad bhavati, yeah. What is it? Annad bhavanti bhutani parjanyad anna sambhava. Yagyad bhavati parjanyo. The rains is a benediction from the demigods, specifically Indra. When he is satisfied through sacrifice. Yagyat bhavanti parjanya. Yeah, these pastimes of Govardhan Leela. And then the Maharaj says, well, we are Vaishyas, we engage in farming. Farming, we depend on rain. And Indra is the provider of the rain. So we should do this sacrifice for the satisfaction of Indra. Right? So without sacrifices, we even cannot get basic necessities of life. What to speak about, next life? For sacrifices, for Vishnu can award ultimate liberation. But even for subsistence, one has to engage in sacrifices. And that's why Krishna is elaborating on so many different kind of sacrifices in the series of verses that we just went over. Some of them were according to the ashrams, some of them were according to the different methods, the others were according to the objects which are offered in the sacrifices. Purport: whatever form of material existence one is in, one is invariably ignorant of his real situation. This applies to everyone. No one is fully realized. We all have our own different identifications because of false ego, aham, right? Because of that aham, we understand ourselves according to our, the species, race, caste, religion, gender, and so many other things, positions in position in the society, designations. And that applies even to the demigods. Though their position is is much better, but they are still within the influence of the three modes of nature. So in this, and because of that influence of the modes, there is an ignorance, and one is not aware of one's real situation. In other words, the existence in the material world is due to multiple reactions to our sinful lives. Ignorance is the cause of sinful life, and sinful life is the cause of one's dragging on in the material existence. So, the cause why we are here, first of all, right? We are here because we are suffering the sin results of our sinful activities. And why did we commit sin in the first place? Well, because of ignorance. Ignorance about our real identity. So this human form of life is the only loophole by which one can get out of this entanglement. So the intelligence is sufficiently developed in this human form that by application, proper application of this intelligence, one can get out of the entanglement. The Vedas therefore give us a chance for escaping by engaging in dharma, artha, kama, and finally moksha, to get out of the miserable condition entirely, right? So that is the path of dharma. See, everyone is interested in sense enjoyment, but generally, especially in the contemporary world, that sense gratification is conducted and pursued outside the realm of the religious platform. So all kind of consumer goods which are produced, which requires extremely laborious industrial enterprises, which has many other challenges. It consumes resources indiscriminately, a lot of pollution, creates energy crisis, so many things. The all these consumer goods are simply created for sense enjoyment. And that sense enjoyment is, it's an artificial sense enjoyment. By the arrangement of the Lord, whatever the senses is needs, right, it's naturally provided in the nature. There is agriculture, there is grains, the oceans, they provide different shells, right? The land, they provide a lot of minerals, there are fruits. And if you see, for millions of years, the civilization has been going on. There are societies, they produce their cloth, silk, satin, even different kind of clothes. You don't need polyester. There's no synthetic cloth required. Even by the arrangement of the Lord, there used to be woolen clothes, cotton clothes, satin and silk, and all that was there. There's no need of creating polyester and nylon and spandex and so many other unnecessary things. So the sense enjoyment is pursued today outside of the platform of dharma. But what is the arrangement of the Lord? Okay, if you need sense enjoyment, well, you need some sort of artha or objects by which one can gratify or satisfy one's senses in a regulated way. So that artha, how can one get that artha? Generally understood as money, but without beyond that, in a generic way, the meaning of artha is anything that helps fulfill a purpose. So different objects or instruments. And then, well, by the yogic path or the dharmic path is by performing religion or dharma, which is you perform one prescribed duties. And then you offer the results of this prescribed duty as a sacrifice. When it's offered as a sacrifice, the Lord kindly continues to shower those benedictions, good weather systems, regulated rain, no extreme droughts, no extreme flooding, no hurricanes, weather is nice, and then the forests are bountiful, the oceans are bountiful, the land is productive. This way we can produce all the things which are needed uh, for keeping our senses pacified. We don't need extreme sense gratification. And in this way, when one is pacified and one life goes on, eventually we'll say, well, what is the purpose of all this anyways? And that higher question develops, then one seeks liberation. So dharma, artha, kama, moksha is the process and arrangement by which everyone can be elevated to spiritual platform and achieve perfection of life in this very life. But because our leaders, they have ulterior motives. There are few individuals who, for their own self-interest, they are exploiting the masses. So they generally, industrial enterprises, the idea is, well, you're providing employment. They provide employment only to a small fraction of individuals. The earth can employ millions of people. There's unlimited land for farming. But the industrial enterprises, in the name of providing employment, very few individuals in the top, generally the entrepreneur who owns the company, they are the richest. They have millions and trillions, millions of dollars. Now it's not millions, it's billions, billionaires. And they also live a very artificial life of extreme sense enjoyment. And by doing what? Making goods which are really not needed. Making goods which are not needed, to selling it to people who don't need, who buy those goods with money that they don't have. So it's all artificial way of life. And what happens, the outcome is, people, when they're subjected to such kind of work environment, they are disturbed. They don't know the purpose of life. They cannot come to the conclusion of their. Here, the karma in the dharmic platform, dharma, artha, kama, will lead to the conclusion of moksha. In the industrial societies, adharma, artha, and kama is a process of vikarma or ugra karma, not sat karma. And that can never lead to the conclusion of moksha. It just leads maybe to the conclusion of atheism. So, the need for sense specification or gratification is real. But if the framework is not right, then the entire human life is spoiled. So the path of religion or different kind of sacrifices recommended above automatically solves our economic problems. By performance of yajna, we can have enough food, enough milk, even if there is so-called increase in population. So our population 8 billion, whatever, right? It's generally in academia, media, they would say, oh, this is the highest population we ever had. But it's nothing. If you read at the scriptural descriptions, like how many residents there were in Ayodhya or Dwarka, or number of soldiers who fought the Kurukshetra war, or in the war with Ravana, it's those numbers are much higher than billions that we are talking about. Earth was able to sustain all of them. What Earth cannot sustain is artificial standards of living which exploit the resources indiscriminately, create so much pollution, suck up all the natural resources for living standards which are artificial and way higher than really that is needed. Those standards for the entire billions of people, that is not possible. Right. So population is not the problem. The problem is the artificial living standards which are being pursued by the entire population at large. So when the body is fully supplied, naturally the next stage is to satisfy the senses. Vedas prescribe, therefore, sacred marriage for regulated sense gratification. Thereby, one is gradually elevated to the platform of release from material bondage. And the highest perfection of liberated life is to associate with the Supreme Lord. So the entire process of dharma, the dharmic platform, will bring us to the right destination if one is sincere. But in the platform of ugra karma, that is never possible. Perfection is achieved by performance of yajna as described above. Now, if a person is not inclined to perform yajna according to Vedas, how can he expect a happy life? Even in this body, what to speak of another body, another planet? This was Krishna's question is to Arjuna in this verse. If there's no yajna, you can't even be happy in this life. So no matter how much technology we might develop, all technologies need energy to be powered. And then who is providing that energy? Well, you can say your nuclear energy or hydroelectricity, solar energy. We're still exploiting nature even to get source that energy. And why the nature is right now reacting with extreme climatic changes, right? Because the process of dharma is not followed. See, all these energy sources are benedictions of demigods, as ultimately through Krishna, right? So the yajna is basically to continue maintaining that order so that we can continue to get those benedictions. So the Ugra Karma society does not acknowledge the existence of the authorities. And that's why these societies are not sustainable. They eventually all collapse. Right now, the weather patterns are so messed up. Right, the entire west coast is burning, through extreme temperatures, so many forest fires, and they're getting worse every year. They are getting larger, more intense. We have a drought scenario. The Colorado River is all sucked up now. The water levels in the Lake Mead are at lowest. They are starting water cuts in Arizona this year. Maybe next year might, eventually impact California. And so, the prosperous southwestern cities, San Diego, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Phoenix, they don't have a long-term future. So the entire basis of civilization, when it's based on uh, artificial standard of living, not recognizing the authorities, cannot sustain. You see, the Vedic civilization lasted for millions of years until the Varnashram was destroyed. And Varnashram was destroyed means sacrifices stopped, and that's why the situation started getting degraded in where the Vedic culture was initially followed. But otherwise, the civilization went on for millions of years. There was no problem. The purpose of Varnashram is what? Yajna. The whole purpose of Varnashram is Yajna. Similarly, other places also, the weather patterns are so messed up. Like Australia, it's burning with forest fires. It's getting worse and worse. The heat levels is increasing. So in this way, if the society does not acknowledge the authorities, and there is no system of sacrifices, the society does not have a future. There are different grades of material comforts in different heavenly planets, and in all cases, there is immense happiness for persons engaged in different kinds of yajna. Said, what was the previous verse? He says, Amrita Bhujam, right? One experiences nectar in performance of those sacrifices. But the highest kind of happiness that a man can achieve is to be promoted to spiritual planets by practice of Krishna consciousness. Life of Krishna consciousness is therefore the solution to all problems of material existence. So that is verse number 31. Any questions or comments? Okay. Verse number 32. Evam bahuvidha yajna vitata brahmano mukhe karmajana viditan sarvan evam gyatva vimokshashe. Translation: all these different types of sacrifices are approved by the Vedas, and all of them are born of different types of work. Knowing them as such, you will become liberated. So these sacrifices, they are not imaginary. It's not a fictional process. It's not that, well, some priest wanted to make some money, so he thought, that priest concocted that there are demigods who provide different benedictions, and you have to give me some dakshina. I'm the middleman. I'm going to milk some money out of you. And so it's all concocted. It's not like that. There might be some priests, who are not sincere, and they might want to They're more interested in their own just a means of, again, maintaining themselves. But that does not mean that the entire process itself is false. I mean, you can always find someone who is sincere in performing those sacrifices. And then there are many sacrifices you don't require a priest, right? Many of them involved required sense control and how the senses are engaged with different sense objects, as sacrifices of austerities, of study of scriptures. Sacrifices, the highest sacrifice in Kali Yuga is Harinam Sankirtan, chanting, congregational chanting of the holy. Sankirtan Yagya, congregational chanting of the holy names of the Lord. So these sacrifices, they are approved by the Vedas, they are not a mental concoction. And what is the foundation of these sacrifices? All of them, they are born of different types of work. Here, work refers to karma. Karma jan means, it's born out of prescribed duties. Here, work doesn't mean any whimsical work, but karma refers to prescribed duties according to Varna. So this Krishna is repeating again. Do you recall there was another verse previously? I believe in the 3rd chapter in the beginning, where Krishna says the same thing, that the sacrifice is born out of work. So it is the same verse. Annad bhavanti bhutani parjanyad anna sambhava yagyad bhavati parjanyo yagya karma samudbhavam. Yagya samudbhavam. Yagya is born out of karma. The same thing Krishna is saying over here. Yagya, what is it? Yeah. Yagya vitataha. Yagyas is born, or they are spread. They are prescribed in the, brahmanaha. They are prescribed in the Vedas through the mouth, right? So the mouth means the Vedas are then spoken. And then they describe that they are born out of work. So that verse also talks about that. Yagya karma samudbhavam. So yagya is born out of prescribed duties. That means, what does it actually mean? See, in order to offer something to Krishna, that means it should be worthy of offering. I given this example many times. If we make a bhoga for Krishna, we cook something, but we desire to enjoy ourselves, that is not worthy of offering to Krishna. That's why we always cover the food plate. The cook or the pujari will cover the thali of bhoga with a cloth, so that no one can see or glance upon the bhoga with the desire of enjoyment. Because if they do, then it's not worthy of offering. We don't offer jutan to Krishna, it's already polluted. Similarly, work which is performed not with a desire to enjoy, that work is worthy of offering to Krishna. So what is that work then? Right? If that work should be conducted without the desire for enjoyment, well, how is that possible? Right? All work, Krishna later in Bhagavad Gita says, what is the impetus for work? Jnanam geyam abhigyata trividha karma chodana. The impetus for work is the object of knowledge, what I desire to achieve. So how is that possible that I can perform a work without having that desire to achieve that object? Well, again, we've discussed this many times, right? So yes, earlier in the initial stages, we have some motivation for sense enjoyment. But that motivation or that stimulus is not so effective because of law of diminishing returns. Eventually, we don't get the same gratification, and so we need higher and higher doses of stimulus. Except if we are engaged according to our nature, we are forced to act. And so now we will get some remuneration to maintain our life, but we are not motivated by that. Now, that stimulus or the enjoying propensity is reduced, at that level of gratification. But because our nature, we are forced to act. And so now in that stage, we can work without fruitive mentality. And that work becomes worthy of offering to Krishna as a sacrifice. And so in that sense, sacrifices are born out of prescribed duties, because if it's not according to those prescribed duties, not according to our nature, then it's very difficult to it's very difficult to not cultivate the fruitive mentality, and thus that work is not worthy of offering. In that same verse later on, Krishna says, well, where does the prescribed duties come from? Yagyad bhavati parjanyo yagya karma samudbhavam. Then what's the next verse? Karma yagya karma samudbhavam. Then the karma, they're described in the Vedas. That's what the next verse says. I'm not able to recall it. It says Brahma karma Brahma samudbhavam, something of that sort. Let's see, I believe it's the 3rd chapter. So in that verse also, Krishna is saying that this karma is described in the Vedas, and the Vedas, they come from me. And then ultimately, everything resides in me, or absolute truth, right? So, annad bhavanti bhutani. Here. So we read that Yagya is born of prescribed duties, and in verse 15 it says, karma brahma udbhavam vidhi. So this karma, prescribed duties, they come from the Brahma. Brahma means the Vedas. Udbhavam means it comes from them. And where does the Vedas come from? Brahma akshara samudbhavam. The Brahma, they are akshara. They come from, who is akshara? Akshara means one who is not fallible. That means Achyuta, who is not fallible. That is Krishna. So Vedas come from Krishna and smell. So Tasmat Sarvagatam Brahmam Nityam Yagya Pratishthitam. So in this way, the Brahma, or the absolute truth, pervades everywhere. Right? So here, the regulated activities or prescribed duties are described in the Vedas. And that's what this verse is also saying. What is saying? See, these sacrifices are approved by the Vedas. And they are born from different types of work, which is what this is saying. Right, in the previous verse, verse number 14, is saying, right, Yagya is born of prescribed duties. Right, so Krishna is repeating that concept. He's already introduced this in the previous chapter. Now he's saying again, that means it's important. Something is repeated twice or more. So he's saying, knowing them as such, you will become liberated. So different types of work, as discussed above, they are mentioned in the Vedas to suit different types of worker. What are different kind of workers? Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, the 4 varnas. And their prescribed duties according to those varnas. Because men are so deeply absorbed in the bodily concept, the sacrifices are so arranged that one can work either with the body, with the mind, or with the intelligence. But all of them are recommended for ultimately bringing about liberation from the body. So we can engage our body, mind, or intelligence ultimately to liberate the body. That means the soul has to arise out of that bodily consciousness. This is confirmed by the Lord herewith from his own mouth. Mukhe. Brahmanaha mukhe. Brahmanaha. From the Vedas. Vedas come directly from the mouth of the Lord. Any questions on verse number 32? Okay. Verse number 33. श्रेयान् द्रव्यमायाद्यज्ञात् ज्ञानयज्ञ परन्तप सर्वकर्माखिलं पार्थ ज्ञाने परिसमाप्यते. Very important verse. Brings us to conclusion. O chastiser of enemies, sacrifices performed in knowledge is better than mere sacrifice of material possessions. After all, O son of Pritha, all sacrifices of work culminate in transcendental knowledge. So this also we have discussed. Initially, one might not know the purpose, the means, or even the process. But so one might be doing sacrifices for ulterior motives. One might be just doing because somebody is asked to do it, or does not have proper understanding. or somebody might have attachment to the tradition. So this is what needs to be done, so I'll do it, but they really don't know the beneficiaries. Eventually, the idea is, well, they will begin to question. Or they might do it for ulterior motives. Say, I want some material benediction, so I'm doing it. But then, law of diminishing returns, you don't get the same level of enjoyment, but one is continuing to do out of habit. Some has some level of piety or discipline, they will continue to do it. But then they'll question, then, okay, then there must be some higher purpose, because ultimately this is not making me, that is not providing me the highest bliss that I'm seeking. Though it is nectarian, I still feel that there is something missing. Well, if I'm not the enjoyer, who is the enjoyer? So in this way, one can come to the platform of knowledge. And then when is performing their activity in knowledge, then that is better than just doing it mechanically or without proper understanding. Just like a child who is self-motivated and he understands why he needs to study, how this study is actually helping him towards that goal. That consciousness is much better than a child who is not mature, is studying, but is not motivated, maybe still getting good grades, but doesn't understand the purpose, is too young to understand it. But eventually the child will come to the platform of maturity. Similarly, the sacrifices performed of mere sacrifice of material possession without understanding the higher purpose is that immature stage, which hopefully should eventually lead to the stage of maturity, where one gets the perfect knowledge and then continues to act in that knowledge. That is much better, because ultimately the idea of sacrifice is to bring us to that transcendental knowledge. Like, in the previous one of the verses earlier, last time we discussed that this knowledge is like the fire which consumes all kind of fuel, right? Fire does not make any discrimination. I will only burn or consume certain kind of fuel. It's like different grades of wood, or different varieties of wood have different efficiency of burning. The kind of heat they yield is different. Similarly, different petroleum products, or they also have different efficiency. But the fire does not make any discrimination. It can consume all kind of fuels. Similarly, the knowledge can consume all kind of activities according to different varnas. The people are just like wood is manifested in different gradations. People are manifested in different varnas based on their nature. But the platform of knowledge is like that fire that makes no discrimination and consumes everything equally, all kind of work. The reactions of all kind of works which are manifested according to different varnas, they are all consumed in that fire of transcendental knowledge. So the purpose is to bring everyone to that platform of knowledge. It doesn't matter if one's a Sudra or a Vaishya or Satriya. They all can come to the same conclusion. Krishna is the Lord, the proprietor, the supreme enjoyer, and my duty is to serve him. That understanding is same for everyone, though they are engaged differently. And so this to bring everyone to that same platform or understanding is the ultimate purpose of the Vedas. So sacrifice performed in knowledge in this way is better than mere sacrifice of possessions. In this way, Krishna is trying to instruct Arjuna, because Arjuna is confused. He asked a couple of times, right? He said, well, if knowledge is better, then why you are asking me to engage in this ghastly war, right? Because Krishna made a point. Well, ultimately, I want you to come to the platform of knowledge. That's the whole purpose. But so Krishna is the same point that is making right now. Krishna has already made it in the past. But that was confusing to Arjuna. He says, okay, if knowledge is better, than mere activity, then why I should, just bring me to the platform of knowledge? Why I have to, why you asking me to engage in war? So Arjuna is still missing the point. He says, yes, the real understanding is, yes, knowledge is better than, mechanical performance of a activity, or as it says over here, mere sacrifice of material possessions without knowledge. But when somebody comes to that platform of knowledge, one has to, it's not that it's theoretical, one has to apply the knowledge. I mean, one has to act, one has to continue to act. Earlier that person was acting without knowledge. Now that one has knowledge doesn't mean you stop acting, rather one acts, continues to act, but now this time with proper knowledge. So that is the real understanding of that particular verse. Right? That's why he's saying is, better than mere sacrifice of material possession means you're sacrificing without knowledge. Now you sacrifice with knowledge. Purport: the purpose of all sacrifices is to arrive at the status of complete knowledge, then to gain release from material miseries, and ultimately to engage in loving transcendental service to the Supreme Lord Krishna, or Krishna consciousness. Right? So, a couple of things happening. Well, through performance of sacrifices, first of all, one maintains their body, all the necessaries are provided by performance of sacrifices. Then eventually one comes to the platform of complete knowledge. Who is the beneficiary? Why we are performing it? Then eventually it awards liberation of material miseries. Right? That means when one acts on that knowledge, one burns all the sinful reaction. And when all sins are destroyed, the material miseries are destroyed as well. And eventually one achieves liberation. But higher than liberation again is bhakti, or engaging in the loving service of the Lord. And so the same process of sacrifices ultimately helps us achieve that. Right? So Harinam Sankirtan Yagya is also a yagya for the satisfaction of the Lord. And the beauty of this yagya is one develops loving transcendental service towards the Lord. Nonetheless, there is a mystery about all these different activities or sacrifices, and one should know this mystery. One should really understand what are all these different sacrifices, how they are acting, how they are purifying me. So one has that understanding, then one can perform those sacrifices in knowledge. That's the whole idea. One will still get the benefit, and even if one does not, just like the medicine is still acting. A child does not, or anyone, even an adult is not a pharmacist, and wouldn't know how the medicine is acting. Medicine still acts. So there is still a benefit, but when one really understands, even if not in detail, they really understand the essence of the which resolves the mystery of the sacrifices, then one makes tremendous advancement. Sacrifices sometimes take different forms according to particular faith of the performance. That's why in the previous verses we went through different kind of sacrifices. Some of them are applicable for the brahmacharis, some of them for grihasthas, and for vanprasthas. Not everyone is engaged in swadhyay, jnana, yagya. Not everyone has the mental capacity. But people, those who particularly brahmanas, kshatriyas, who are trained in that fashion, they can engage in scriptural study. Others who are trained can engage in tapo yagya. The Vaishyas can engage in dravya yagya, because by their profession they are the productive class and they produce so many dravyas which can be offered as sacrifice. So in this way, according to different social and spiritual positions and different faiths of the performance, sacrifices, it's an adaptive process. It's not like this is the only way if sacrifice can be performed. Krishna has been very kind. According to our conditioning, so many different kind of sacrifices are provided, and we can pick up the ones which are suited for us. When one's faith reaches a stage of transcendental knowledge, the performer of sacrifices should be considered more advanced than those who simply sacrifice material possessions without such knowledge. For without attainment of knowledge, sacrifices remain on the material platform and best of no spiritual benefit. So, as I said, some benefit is there, but that benefit is mostly limited on a material level. By performance sacrifices without proper understanding, demigods are still pleased, and they would provide us with different natural necessities for the body to continue. So, in that sense, it's a material platform. But when one comes to the proper conclusion, when develops transcendental knowledge, who the real beneficiary is, then one makes spiritual advancement. And then one continues to perform the sacrifices, but what has changed is the consciousness. When one acts in proper consciousness, then one gains spiritual benefits. Real knowledge culminates in Krishna consciousness, the highest stage of transcendental knowledge. Without the elevation of knowledge, sacrifices are simply material activities. Like it's a transactional. Well, I do something to please the demigods. In return, the demigods provide things that which I need. So that sacrifice is there, but sacrifice is not out of love. It's not out of a what do you call it? It's not with a sense of purification. It's still it's highly fruitive in mentality. Just like sometimes you want something from government authorities, and we might provide them some gifts in kind, and then they might be more willing to, especially where there's more corruption or people ask favors, seen in that fashion, right? So, yeah, if the knowledge does not culminate in Krishna consciousness, which is the highest stage of transcendental knowledge, then it is on a material level, right? So there is some benefit of the sacrifices, but that benefit is on a material level, not on a spiritual level. And however they are elevated to the level of transcendental knowledge, all such activities enter into the spiritual platform. Depending on differences in consciousness, sacrificial activities are sometimes called karma kanda. So kanda is different. It refers to a section. In the Vedas, there are different sections, and there's a section where the different yagyas are prescribed with the motivation of getting something material in the result in this life or next life. Because if people in general by default they have fruitive mentality, so if you directly tell them, hey, you should perform sacrifice for satisfaction of Vishnu, then they have no interest. So the idea is let them engage even with fruitive mentality. At least they are coming from the platform of adharma or ugra karma to the platform of dharma, right? In the pursuit of artha and kama. Artha and kama desire is there, so you cannot artificially cultivate renunciation in them. Let them have the fruity mentality, but engage now on the religious platform in your pursuance of material desires. But you offer the results, a fraction of it, right? Because it's performed sacrifice, you're not offering everything. So, but we are offering that as a sacrifice, then that is called karma yoga, right? And this karma yoga will yield to jnana and vairagya. Knowledge and renunciation is the outcome of karma yoga. Well, how renunciation? Again, law of diminishing returns will naturally lead to renunciation. And when it leads to renunciation, he says, okay, well, now I'm not enjoying. I mean, I don't get the same level of excitement or stimulation from it, but I'm still doing it. Then for whom I am doing it? So then it brings him to the platform of knowledge, right? And so that is jnana kanda. So the karma yoga then matures into jnana yoga. Jnana yoga is same as karma yoga, but now that work is done with the proper understanding of knowledge. That is jnana yoga. Now jnana kanda. So whenever there is a kanda, is improper understanding. Yoga means proper understanding. Karma kanda means you perform fruitive activities, as you perform prescribed duties with fruitive mentality. That is karma kanda. Karma yoga means performing prescribed duties without fruitive mentality, but with the mentality to satisfy Krishna. So that's the difference between kanda and yoga. Similarly, jnana yoga means, again, now I'm situated on a platform of knowledge, and I'm cultivating that knowledge more about knowing who Krishna is, what is my relationship with him, how should I satisfy him, right? But Gyan Kanda means this is the impersonal understanding where they think, well, the soul is degraded to this world, has fallen down because of ignorance. And if this soul becomes free from ignorance by cultivation of knowledge, then we'll achieve liberation. So the Gyanis, they're interested in simply liberation. They don't have the higher understanding of the personality of Godhead. So in this way, the ultimate objective is cultivation of knowledge. So this is the sum and substance of this verse. I think we'll conclude the class today. Were there any final questions? I'm happy to take them right now. Anyone?
Shamin bhai.
Yeah.
So I mean, uh, here I'm just a bit confused as usual. So when we are here we are saying that the Gnan Yoga, basically the yajna, what we do is something important, like the karma which we do, and then one place we also, even Arjuna also had a question that, if Gnan is something which I can get, and I can get elevated to the next level, then why you're required to do the prescribed duties? And then when we say that, okay, let's do the prescribed duties, so I mean, right now we are living such a life that we are not able to combine everything together. I mean, if you want to gain the knowledge, but you need to apply it to for day-to-day activities, then how we can balance again in this situation? Because I'm just trying to always trying to uh, m- you know correlate with our life, and then what we have to do at this point of time.
Yeah. So how do you apply this in your life? Is that the question,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah. So the application, you have all the components together. You have to put it together, put it everything in place. For instance, in order to maintain our body, in order to maintain our family, we have to do the work. There's no, Krishna says, without work we cannot even maintain the body. So there's no question of not doing activities, right? We have to be engaged in work. But what needs to change is the consciousness. So how do we come from the consciousness of fruitive mentality to the mentality that I'm not the enjoyer, Krishna is the enjoyer, I'm the secondary enjoyer. Uh, and then whatever results we get, we offer it to Krishna. So it does not require a drastic change in our life. It does require a drastic change in our consciousness. And that is the process, right? So, you have deities at home, you are cooking, every day we have to cook, right? So we make bhoga, we offer it to Krishna. It's an extra step. It should not take a lot of time and energy to offer it to Krishna. Or if we, now the income that we are earning, a fraction of that money, you can be engaged in direct service of Krishna. You can, again, maybe you buy different paraphernalia, different flowers, you make garlands, you can buy new dresses and you offer it to the deity of Krishna. Mm. You can help with distribution of spiritual literature, right? And so in this way, this the income that is earned, right, you're using a fraction of that in the service of the Lord, right? And so that is a sacrifice. Yeah, I mean, you could have used that money to save or invest, but now your sacrifices mean you're taking a personal inconvenience for a higher purpose, right? So then the entire process now becomes spiritual just by that extra endeavor, uh, which should be very easy to adapt. Does that make sense? So
Yep.
you have to act on the knowledge. Like when you say, okay, Krishna is the ultimate enjoyer, then okay, that is the correct conclusion. Now, if you come to the correct conclusion, we have to act on that conclusion. That means our existing activities now we dovetail with that proper understanding, which wasn't there earlier. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. If there are no further questions, we'll conclude today's class. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.